Hey guys. Alright, so as everyone knows, it is confirmed that yes, Bones is in fact swapping the arcs around, and the episode this week pretty much confirms that. In fact, a funny thing happened where immediately after recording last week's MHA Season 5 review, I got the notification from Crunchyroll's YouTube community tab of this, but let's talk about the arc swap itself, because honestly, this is because honestly, it's so complicated. After watching this episode, I have so many complicated feelings because from what I've seen of the on one hand, from what I've seen of the overall reaction to this, I think I'm one of the few anti-tubers who, while I do have my concerns, I can still see how this can still work because there are aspects to the Endeavor Agency arc that I can see what's going through Bones' mind in making this switch and how they're envisioning it. Which, truthfully, after watching this episode, they are working with the material fairly well and making it work for them. But on the other hand, where I think going this route might backfire is that from this point onwards, there are some pretty huge reveals and plot points that are going to be a little tougher to streamline. In fact, after watching this episode, the only way I can see Bones make the back half of this arc work at all is if they're planning to either adapt the MLA arc as a concurrent event to the Endeavor Agency arc, or they're planning to take those very specific sections from this arc and move it somewhere else, which the only feasible place I can think for them to rearrange all these specific chunks that they're not going to adapt would be either in the beginning of season 6 or somehow work it into the back half of season 5. But either way, we are skipping over huge chunks of the Endeavor Agency arc from here. With that said, though, let's talk about the new opening, and starting off small with the music. I'm not gonna lie, tonally, while it may not entirely match the psychological beatdown of the visuals and arc it's representing, I always kinda have had a soft spot for whenever the anime goes for a bit more of a smooth rock, rock track for its openings, rather than something big and bombastic, as it has this heroic atmosphere, but it also has a more of a bit more of a pretty much a sadder or a sad feel to it as well, or an emotionally heavy feel to it. So yeah, I kind of like them in that regard. With that said, let's talk about the opening itself, because the visuals all but pretty much confirm that yes, the Meta Liberation Army arc is still happening in this season, but kind of going off what I just said, the only big question I've got is how Bones plans to address elements from the aftermath of that arc that are going to be in this one, because right now they are making certain moments work for them, but at the same time they are walking a tightrope where I can see Bones' strategy potentially fall apart if they aren't meticulous in their execution from here on out, because like Bones is pretty much treading water with a lot of like plot heavy moments, and they might, and I don't know how. I'm just thinking in my head, how can they make all these big plot reveals and moments work in the next arc? I don't know. For example, one thing I think that is working to the Switch Up's advantage is Hawks himself, because there are certain scenes with him you could argue work better if this were to come after the Meta Liberation Army arc. But I kind of like how we're seeing a little more early on Hawks' interactions with people like Endeavor, Izuku, and Genius, because those specific interactions are kind of the series' way of building trust between these characters that is going to come into play and make them into real, and is going to make people like Hawks and Genius and all them into reliable allies that Izuku will be forced to depend on when everything gets blown wide open. And I'm not even talking about the Meta Liberation Army arc here, but even the aftermath of the arc after that one. And it is laying that groundwork for people like Hawks and Endeavor, for people like Hawks and Endeavor to become allies for Izuku to depend on when the time comes. Now, granted, on the flip side to that, Scenes like the implications of what happened to Genius in this episode, Hawks giving Endeavor the coded information he's gathered with the revelation of the Metal Liberation Army's existence, and the semi-introduction of a certain character who's supposedly Hawks' superior on the villain side. All these things are just are scenes that are just barely skirting that line of making it work. And the way it's presented, you can tell Bones is you can almost tell Bones is also keenly aware of this fact, because they are they are having to do this thing where where whenever they dive into something from the aftermath of the Metal Liberation Army arc, they're choosing how much of that scene to adapt and how they present it. Now, talking about the parts that actually revolve around Izuku, Bakugo, and Todoroki starting their work studies under Endeavor, the one thing I kind of appreciate is that even though this is an opportunity for all of them, very early on in this portion of this episode, we're shown how working under Endeavor can benefit Bakugo, because it's been no secret that Endeavor and himself both have quirks with a large amount of destructive force. And for a lot of people, it's been kind of one of those things where more often than not, even if we're not willing to admit it, we have wondered how, with a quirk like Bakugo's, it's obviously a quirk that's perfect for fighting villains, but how can Bakugo feasibly use his explosion quirk to protect anyone? But with this episode, we already see one way that is possible through Endeavor's capture of a villain, and it's already showing Bakugo how he can do two things at one time if he can learn in order to set the circumstances correctly. Like, he pretty much needs to, in order for Bakugo to effectively use his quirk to do two things at once, he needs to set the circumstances where the villain plays it at his hands rather than him playing into the villain's hands, kind of thing. Also, I absolutely love how when we get introduced to Endeavor's sidekicks, their personalities are such the complete opposite of Endeavor himself that you wonder what were the circumstances that he even chose them, or if it's a lot like the Night Eye situation where they just kind of started tagging along without asking. Like, it's kind of one of those things where, yeah, you just kind of wonder what exactly are the circumstances of Endeavor's sidekicks being like even being with him, and even just like the work environment in itself of Endeavor's agency is like, this is not entirely what I expected. It's, as you see, it's pretty, like the entire work environment around Endeavor's agency is all just pure chaos, and you kind of expect it to be weirdly a little more organized for someone like Endeavor. Like, Endeavor is someone who whether you love him or hate him now, he's someone who always who kind of demands almost this kind of a bit of a regiment and a very strict environment almost. So it's like you gotta in some ways his work environment is the complete opposite of what you would expect. But yeah, it's one of those, I just kind of love the contrast of how everything in Endeavor's agency is the complete opposite of what he is as a person, I guess you could say. And I guess that is, I guess too, we don't know how much has changed ever since he started his evolution of change too. So yeah. With that said, if I weirdly did have one thing, and I think that this is also something that is becoming a bit of a problem with the fact of the change in arc. With the change in arc is because they are skipping over certain things. It doesn't blend, or the pacing doesn't blend or run as smoothly as it should. Like, even though this arc adapted 3 chapters worth of material, it felt like maybe 1.5 to 2 at best. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but yeah. But yeah, guys, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Analyst, Crunchyroll, and be sure to hit the notification button, and be sure to just share it around, guys. Dev Night signing off. Later.